Did you know that 81% of customers will try to handle problems themselves by searching out solutions? If you're using traditional service flows, you're missing out on digital customer journeys that happen long before they get to one of your agents. Digital Superience with Nice CX1 solves that issue by proactively meeting customers on a web search level outside your website. Give customers resolutions faster, smarter, and more instinctively. That's Digital Superience. That's Nice CX1. Learn more at nice.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Webcology on WMR.fm. It's the 29th of September, 2022. This is Jim Hedger from Digital Always Media, Dave Davies from Weights and Biases. And we're recording to a new WMR.fm. If anyone's gone to the website recently, or tried to find any of the old shows on any run-of-the-mill search engine like Google, Bing, or something else, you'll have noticed that the shows have changed, or the environment's changed kind of dramatically, and in a way that's kind of indicative of the content environment that's out there now and how people are, consuming podcasts and relating to the content. WMR is adopting more of a Netflix streaming style in the way it presents content than a coherent network, the way that it had presented content before. You remember in the early days, Webmaster Radio, when we were like a radio station.
Yeah.
People listened to us we were on the air because we were doing live casts on the web. And we were at the conferences as Webmaster Radio. We had the booth with the stacks of loudspeakers on either side, and all of that crazy stuff was a insane, incredibly fun, but unfortunately kind of bygone era. The conference circuit may come back again, and such shenanigans may happen again, but they aren't happening right now, and they haven't for a few years. The way the content's being presented has changed. There is you're going to be asked to register to see content in some cases for some of the really old archive content and stuff you absolutely can't get anywhere else. That's become premium content. I'm talking stuff like Jeremy Shoemaker's Shoe Money Show, Greg Nyland's Good Karma, shows from back in the earliest days of the search marketing industry. Strike Point from the guys in Europe, and Webmasters on the Roof, stuff like that. Webcology and SEO 101, and a few other current shows that are creating new content. They and their archives are in the free section. But register at WMR.fm and get access to huge swaths of content that honestly doesn't exist anywhere else on the web, but did exist in this carnival environment that we created at the early part of the century. Man, that was fun.
That was fun.
You could go back again. Seriously, if you could go back to 2006, 2010, would you go back to that lifestyle?
For a day.
For a couple of days, sure. The thing about those days is we were constantly traveling. I don't know about you, Dave, but I used to play the game of adding up all the travel time and figuring out how much time of my life I'd spent in an airplane or in travel, like in an airplane, in a cab, or in transit in any given year. One year it turned out to be 2.5 weeks, all totaled together.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That wasn't being at the hotel or anything. That was just being in transit, just getting somewhere.
Yeah.
I
know. I remember conferences where it's like, all right, I guess I'm not going home. between them.
Well, yeah, you have like three different conferences over 4 different weeks in 3 different cities, all of them in the southern part of the states.
Yeah,
What's the point of flying home again?
exactly.
So, but again, that's sort of over. Now you do 3 or 4 conferences in an afternoon in your living room, recording your sessions for each of them. They're like happening a month in advance, you know. Um, okay, so that was the new WMR network, Netflix style. Please register and then check out some of the content there. Barry Schwartz, who continues to publish articles at a Herculean crazy rate, tweeted a really cool tweet today. He also has a YouTube channel, which you might or might not have guessed this, but he's playing with YouTube too. He says he's sitting in around 14,700 last time I looked. If he hits 20,000 YouTube subscribers by the end of October, so not by the end of September, by the end of October, this is over at youtube.com/users/rustybrick. He's going to donate 5,000 to the Ukraine charity of Anton Shuki, whatever Anton wants. Barry's going to donate to it. So $5,000 to an incredibly good cause. If you become a subscriber, and 6,000 of your closest friends become subscribers at Barry's channel.
It was funny because I read that and I'm like, oh, I'll go and give him one. Oh, no, too late. Sorry, Barry. I'm already in there, so I can't add to your numbers. Yeah, I think that's great. It's like a nice one. I'm sure it's like, technically it probably just rides that line on guidelines.
I think Google would overlook this one.
I think they would too.
It's Barry, and B, it's a donation to Ukraine. Either way,
yeah.
Google's going to probably overlook this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so where to go first? You know what? It's the core update and the product review updates both apparently stopped running on Monday. They finished their rollouts, and now's the time to panic. I mean, if you're going to jump off a building, today's the time to do it. No, I mean, now's the time you might see volatility or change in rankings. You're certainly going to see an uptick in crawl stats if Google's interested in your website and reevaluating your site. But if you don't see anything, you're fine. You did great. If you did see something, it may take a new rollout of the next iteration of a review algorithm for Google to unclog whatever's clogged in how it's looking at you.
Yeah, well, it's something that I think is my 2-bit opinion on something too for folks, because I always wait for the other shoe to drop, right? And then I read core, right? Like core update. Okay, so like now we're talking about like building block kind of update and stuff. Why? Like anytime you do a core update, at least in my mind, when I envision Google doing a core update, it's because they need to build something in. It's not like the product review update or something where it's an algorithm built for a purpose. It's like, no, this is like the sort of building block kind of algorithm. That means they need to do something that they can't right now, right? Like caffeine, we're speeding things up, right? Like things like that, where these are like rudimentary things to accomplish a bigger picture sort of task. I often, after I see like when I'm seeing, okay, it's done, and it's like, all right, now, if you built this core update to allow you to add in new algorithmic capabilities, like, oh, we couldn't do this thing when we couldn't assess entities in this way, we couldn't, whatever it might be that they were trying to accomplish. It may be that this was designed to allow them to actually bolt in additional algorithms that they weren't able to. It might just be now things are faster. Like who knows what now our internal networks work better, whatever. So I do wonder, is there another shoe about to drop? Was this to do something to introduce new algorithms? And all of a sudden, we're going to see more shakeups as additional algorithmic updates roll out that we're building on this core update. Who knows? I'm interested.
I'm 90% absolutely yes. And here's why. How to say this? Google is completely changing the way it evaluates websites. We still, and I think we have our feet in sort of on both horizons right now. Links are still radically important. Links are everything. The weight of links, citation of links, how energy flows between links, and the way Google evaluates one page and uses it as a positive or neutral reference point to another page. All of that is still incredibly important. Mm-hmm. It's the core of how Google ranks websites. But there's a whole bunch of other information Google wants to be able to distribute that is either credible or not credible, with or without links. Don't worry about link evaluation. It's going to happen on a certain day at a certain time, and the ticket price is X dollars per unit. That concert is that dance or concert or event is going to happen on that day. You don't need a whole bunch of links to confirm that. You need schema to draw that information out. You need machine learning to really quickly evaluate stuff it saw elsewhere. Not necessarily links coming to a page, but just information that Google understands to be true. So 3 websites are talking about the ABC festival in Sausalito. So Google knows there's definitely a festival in Sausalito. It's got all that information. What it needs to know now is from the organizers, how many tickets are there and how do people get there? And all that information can be fed to it via schema. Doesn't need links, or it can be fed to an HTML page. So Google's moving away from strictly having links and is now into machine learning and understanding what people mean through similes and synonyms and regional idioms and stuff. And I think it's drawing all of that machine learning and schema information together. And this is where like product review and the types of algo updates it's been doing recently come into play. They've all been around the way Google processes user-generated information. Product reviews over and over. This is like the 5th product review update in a month. Or I'm sorry, in the last few months. So I'm pretty sure that the core update is all about integrating Google's understanding of information, including like user-generated information based on what tons of other people are saying, not necessarily based on links.
I'm sorry, Jim, are you suggesting that user signals are used as a ranking?
Not well, yes and no, not as a direct correlation. Like X number of clicks equals a increase in rankings. But as a Google sees that so many other websites and so many other writers are saying this is happening, this is an event, this is an analysis. This is how rust oxidizes, stuff like that, and it confirms ideas to be true through things that it's learned, not because a bunch of people link to a document. And that's the change I think Google's trying to figure out, and much of that is based on information feeds to it, schema. Mm-hmm. So no, it's not. It's not like it's not like what you said, man. It's not like that at all. I think it's Google maturing into a new way of understanding its own index.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen the sort of writing on, and folks, this is not to say that links aren't important.
No, right? Links are important.
But I think you're right. They are becoming one signal among many that helps determine authority, right? And we've seen that sort of like moving over time, whereas like in like 98, 99, that was it. Links were votes. The most votes won, right? Like was kind of what it boiled down to. And then over 20 odd years, it's just been sort of refining on that to try and add in more authoritative signals, really, like just quality of the content, the entities on the page, other references around the web, right? Like all of that sort of stuff. So I think you're spot on. I was hoping to catch you saying that user behavior impacts rankings, but
well, it does. But user behavior impacts rankings the same way that search quality raters, following the search quality rater guidelines, impact rankings by, informing Google that people think this about the way the rankings are set up. Not, you know what I mean? And I think that's what user clicks prove. User clicks prove that users think the SERPs look like users feel about the search results. You can base that's why Google's interested in user behavior. I think they're tangentially interested in site health and stuff like that based on user behaviors, and that site health gives them a indication of whether they should or shouldn't reference this website in relation to a query. But that's, you can't figure that out by trying to follow the algorithm backwards to figure out how Google does that. You just got to make quality product.
Well, indeed. And you know what? Google said that a bunch of times. And it was John Mueller who I think had mentioned it last. And we'll be talking about him later in the show as well, because it's a show on SEO. So of course,
he's got to check his
Mueller,
blood pressure, man.
Yeah, that's very true. But I remember him mentioning that they don't use it to assess your site. They use it to assess the quality of their algorithm, right? Like these user metrics, just like you or I would. We look in our analytics and go, how are people behaving on my site on different sections and different types of content, that sort of thing, right? Like they're basically using it the same. I found it sort of funny tongue in cheek where I'm like, oh, okay, so you're not going to affect my site if it behaves poorly. You're just going to change the algorithm so it's going to omit sites like mine. Like, so it still hurts. But I think it is a very, very important difference to your point. Like I think to what you were getting at, where if you just produce something good, then naturally the algorithm will favor that. Now, having said that, I do feel a bit like, yes, but there are ways, there's more at play than just like build good content. It'll rank great. There's obviously a lot of like technical and link-based stuff
but there's a lot of, you know what? If you build a really, really, really good structure, you've probably got a house that's going to last for a very long time. Now, I can say that all day long. That doesn't mean I know how to build a really good structure. There's a lot of tools involved in building a really good structure and a lot of math involved. A lot of way things are done that most people don't know. That's why most people don't build their own houses.
Right.
Similarly, yeah, indeed. When I say build a good product, indeed, there's a good amount of research involved.
Yeah.
But that's part of making a good product.
Well, indeed. I mean, something that you touched on there, and I think like understanding your role is great, right? Like I work with very talented developers. My job is not to be able to go to them and go, here's the code to deploy to make the site better. My job is to go to them and go, here's a problem. Here's how I can tell it's a problem. Maybe here's a link to like somebody's solution that might help you out, but maybe not. But more importantly, here's how I'm going to know when that problem is fixed, right? Like a clear, like when I run this crawl and this happens, I know it's fixed. Or when I look at the cache, I know that this is what it's now seeing. That's my job. My job isn't to know code like at that level, right? So yeah, I think you were touching on that. Like you might not know how to fix it, but you know how to identify it and you know how to tell when it's fixed.
Indeed. But a quick note to the developers about exactly what Dave just said. Look, we know that you're rolling your eyes at a lot of this stuff that you already knew, that you already scheduled the fix. We know that. But it's still our job to point it out. So tick it off the box. Just, that's just how it is. But just to reach across the aisle and shake hands a little bit, we know. I got a couple of developers who are literally rolling their eyes today at me because of a bunch of recommendations I made that I've been making for the last few weeks. It's my job to make these damn recommendations because they pay for these damn audits. That's how it goes.
Yeah, well, you know what? If nothing else, like they can rest assured that now the business owner or the person that is judging things understands that that thing they already had on their list to tackle is right. It is confirmed that it was important to do. So if nothing else, the developers can just take that as like see, we told you. So
me looking goofy makes you look like a superstar, man. Jeez. Okay. So we said we are gonna mention John Mueller. And honest to goodness, I think like I don't know if he needs to have his blood pressure taken or anything. It's all at our age, it's always a good idea, John. Seriously, because he gets asked a bunch of questions that are either very silly or very hard to answer. And no matter what, everybody who's interested sits on everything he says. He's like the chair of the Fed when it comes to making pronouncements, right? Okay, so I don't know which one to go with. God damn it, don't change your URLs for SEO reasons, god damn it. Or honey, if you don't know, you're in Vegas. I don't know which one. So, okay, so remember those magic days when we were all traveling and we were on the road like all the time and you were exhausted and half the time you didn't even know what city you were in?
Yeah.
We pulled into Las Vegas and went straight from the airport to a hotel diner. And I forget, we'd done 2 conferences in the last 2 weeks and just completely beat. This was our last one before we were going back to Florida. And I sort of was half awake, half asleep in the hotel diner, like this old style greasy spoon diner in a really fancy Las Vegas hotel. And I half, honest to God, half woke up and said to the waitress or people at the table who were with me, Darren and Brandy and maybe Brasco and whoever else, and asked where we were. And the waitress, chewing gum, sort of spat back at me, honey, if you don't know, you're in Vegas. And that's the tone I got from a response John Mueller made about content. And if you don't know your content's expertly written, it's probably not. So that's an interesting statement, an interesting comment. I think a lot of people are confused about what expertise means when it comes to developing content. For instance, if you're writing about weather, do you need to be a weather person? Do you need to be a meteorologist? Do you need to have gone to university and have letters after your name? Do you need to have a basic BA if you're writing about the weather? If you're writing about farming, do you need to be an agriculturalist? Do you need to have been a farmer to competently write about farming and agriculture? What's the test of expertise or of experts to Google? And it may not be what most people think it is. The test for expertise in Google's eyes is the ability to research and ferret out information and present it back in an ordered way. Not that you are the preeminent expert in whatever field. They don't really know about
indeed.
that.
Well, and a great example. I was chatting with one of the authors, that works for our company. And I was chatting with him this morning, and he's writing a whole series. It's on reinforcement learning. But the reason that he's writing that series is that he's learning it right now. And so as he's learning something, he's writing a piece on it. Is he the most knowledgeable person in the entire company on machine learning? No. Is he the most qualified to go, here's all the questions that I had as a beginner into this field? Like he's great at machine learning. He's just learning a new field of it, or like sort of refining a different area of it. And so now he's writing a series on that. Is he the most qualified to go, if I want to learn this and I have just learned it, does that make me qualified to come up with the tutorial for people to introduce them to the concept? Absolutely. So he's not the most knowledgeable necessarily in the company on machine learning as a whole, doesn't have that expertise, but he's the most qualified to be writing a series introducing sort of beginner level people to a concept that he's learning right now. So
it all comes down to
it's interesting.
It all comes down to what and how he presents that information.
Very much, and thankfully he is a very good teacher. so that part will work well, and he does exactly to the point here. He does a monster amount of research. But it's because he's trying to learn it for himself. So he does a monster amount of research, and he's just, going, well, why don't I write about it too? Probably very similar to you or I do, right? Like I'll read a white paper or patent, and it's like, well, guess I might as well write an article on it now. I think I've just gone to all the hard work.
I have plenty of content that I've written on plenty of different subjects that I have never gone to school for.
Right.
That is ranking right now on a search engine near you. Yeah, I think, and and again, it's about the way the information is presented and getting the user, the search user, to the information they're looking for. I'm not saying write to queries, write to keywords, or anything like that. Write to the subject, and if the subject is interesting to a sufficient number of people, you'll have high search traffic if it's well written.
An example that they had, I don't know if it's in the latest set because I've only sort of read the change logs on it, but that they did have and probably still do in the quality rater guidelines. And I thought it was a great one, although I'm going to expand on it a little bit. But is if you were having a piece, you were your partner or spouse was dealing with the fact that you had cancer, right? And they were, looking for some assistance, and looking for some tips and advice on how do I deal with this? What's the sort of mental things? Would the piece be best written by somebody with 15 years of medical experience? They are a doctor. They've dealt with, a bunch of people and treatments and stuff like that. Is that the most qualified person? Or is it a counselor who might have 5 years of schooling under their belt, but they've counseled a bunch of people like that? Or is it somebody who actually was the spouse taking somebody through treatment and sort of chronicling their experience? I would argue it's probably one of the last two where you would find the most. So just to illustrate again, even in their guidelines, they're going, expert doesn't necessarily mean education. It means experience in a specific sort of area that is being sought at that time. And so yeah, to that point, if you can research it, great. Or it might just be that you just know it because you've dealt with it. And so you're just writing from your own experiences on something.
Now, that said, there are certain products out there like InLinks. There are certain things that Google's trying to accomplish, and ways it's trying to rank documents and information against other information. And one of those ways is to suss out the context of what an individual searcher might mean as she or he or they are entering their search query. And often people use the weirdest, verbose terms to search for stuff. That concept where you describe three things, and from those three things, people can they can pretty much geolocate you to very, very close to where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Google kind of does that with entities, and trying to figure out what somebody is talking about based on the relationship of the words they're using, the terms that they're using, and the way they're using them to other entities that it's already formed opinions on, formed ideas and perceptions on that are in this database. And tools like Dixon Jones's InLinks will help you identify those entities. So all the talk about expertise and research and all that sort of stuff, there are other things to do there are ways to insert concepts, words, and ideas, or at least find ideas to write to. And there are tools out there that are really useful in the SEO world. But the general idea is to create. I mean, it's dumb and cheesy and basic, but it's how it works. Create the stuff that people want to look at. And
well, indeed, and something, you mentioned his name. I was chatting with Dixon last week, and just as a note for our regular listeners, we'll be hearing from Dixon on our show in the not too distant future with some pretty cool stuff that is being sort of added in to their tool set. So just a little teaser for some folks.
Quick,
that they're doing some neat stuff.
I'm not sure. We got to call him sir. Like the Queen's dead. Are we still obligated to call him Sir Dixon?
You know what? It sounds cool, so let's do it.
Okay, indeed. Okay, so going back to John Mueller and his blood pressure, maybe we can get Dixon to talk to John about this. He's gonna listen to us or Sir Dixon, right? So John is tired of dumb questions, and I think this is a really dumb one. Should you change URLs for SEO purposes? Is there any SEO value to changing URLs to get some keywords in there and get a couple of inches out of that? I think John came close to swearing when he said no, but he was really emphatic about it. No. In fact, he's really tired of people doing this. No. There's no value in changing your URLs. So next time your clients talk to you about changing the URLs, no. More importantly, if you're out there and you're a client on the client side of things, next time some SEO comes and talks to you about having to change all your URLs for SEO purposes, no. When you do a major site migration, you're probably going to change all your URLs. And then your SEO should be talking about 301 redirects and getting them right. That's important. But
yeah, here's where I have such a funny one. I 1000% agree with John on this one, right? I'm sure you do too. We've all been here, right? Like anybody who's been to this rodeo is like the costs outweigh the benefits for sure on changing your URLs, dealing with redirects. What if, I know they say there isn't, but what if there is some like degradation of link value through a 301, right? Like you add in a bunch of variables that we just don't want to have. But when you say like the advice is to not do that, at the same time, that kind of almost implies that your URL structure doesn't impact your rankings. But if you came to me and said, I'm launching a new site, it has products, what should my hierarchy and my URLs be? I would have an answer. I would go, here's what the hierarchy should be. What it would be would vary based on the site, but there would be a hierarchy. There would be a URL structure, not just a hierarchy, but a naming convention to the actual final slug that I would suggest as an SEO. So on one hand, we're saying there is a value to your URLs and URL structure. And then on the other hand, going, but don't change it for SEO, right? Like it's a weird dichotomy. At the end of the day, I think what John, and I guess he can't say it this way, is we know there is a value to like offering the clarity of what a page is about through the use of keywords, and even reinforcing structure to a certain degree. I would argue is one of those things you can do through URL structures, through like the path structure, but the costs to you in your business in changing these URLs is going to be higher, and you'll be introducing variables that are not worth it given the minor benefit that you might get. And I think that's sort of what he's getting at.
Yeah, if you've existed online for a while, Google knows what your website looks like. It knows where stuff is. If you're going to change the URLs, your Google won't know where stuff is anymore. It might be able to find stuff with greater clarity because you've described exactly what's there. But if you just change URLs, you're going to get a decrease in search references while Google figures it out. And how long it takes Google to figure out and how much you got to struggle to get it back again, well, who knows? You're really rolling the dice. Now, again, this happened for a lot of people, especially early in the pandemic and moving into from 2021 to 2022, it became the season of the migration. And so there was a lot of changing URLs out there. And for all we know, those core updates may well be Google dealing with the, oh my God, of the entire web, changing address all at the same time. I don't know. But seriously, can you imagine how much processing power that must have taken? Because everybody migrated in the last year. Like everyone moved up from little robust do-it-yourself website to like Shopify and BigCommerce and Volusion and the big houses. So that's when changing addresses happens, and your URLs are going to change. That's a natural thing. But just for the hell of it, yeah. Okay, last stupid question. Maybe. Is there a measure for duplicate content? Is there a percentage? Is there a way Google looks at your website and goes, yeah, that's 50% plus one, gone? Is there anything like that out there? What do you think?
I think the answer is yes. Like, okay. I know what the answer that we're talking about is, but here's my like litmus test on that one. Is I like to go to extremes, right? Is 0% duplicate content? No, obviously not. Is 100% duplicate content? Why, yes, of course it is. So somewhere there is a threshold that gets crossed. It just has to happen. Well, now, I think context comes into a lot of that, though, which might be what he's also alluding to in this.
Well, and also define content. Like, is content source code? Is content images? And is content just text, an idea? Okay, so there's a lot of duplicate content on the web. Real estate sites will use the exact same text, the same header, the same footers, often the same descriptors of every town USA. Used car websites. I'm looking over at you, Rachel. Used car websites have duplicate content up and down and all over, often in all caps and misspelled. But it's still, it's funny. You could enter a misspelled all cap from auto site and find it on 20 other auto sites. It's hilarious. And do that sometime. Go to Google and do that. It's uncanny. That's all duplicate content, and Google doesn't want to rank more than one incident of it, misspelled or not. Google would prefer if you spelled it correctly, by the way. User experience and all that, and also Google doesn't want to look dumb. But that's all duplicate content. Google doesn't want to rank more than one incident of it because why should they? So Google's going to find it. It's going to ferret it out. Schools, school boards, universities, they all, churches. How many Bible verses are printed on how many websites? Which is the version of that Bible verse that's going to best match the search that the searcher has entered? There's relatively few choices to surface there. There might be a bit of changing in words here and there, but it's really that when it comes to that kind of duplicate content, and it's manifest, obviously, it's going to come down to quality and page quality, quality of experience, of user experience, and how links probably how hyper referenced that website is relating to the query as entered by the user.
Well, indeed. And I mean, there are, like you mentioned code earlier, there's plenty of examples where, like, let's say we have 2 pages, right? And one of them is unique and one of them has 30% content that's been like taken from another web page, for example, both answering the same sort of question. Is one of them going to be superior to the other? Maybe, but maybe not, right? And to illustrate an example, I've done write-ups of papers that include no reference to the actual content of the paper itself. I've also done ones where 20-30% of the thing is like in this section and I paste the section and then I write an analysis of it and then I move on to the next one. Is there a better format? Is the fact that 20 to 30% of one is duplicate content, does that fundamentally make it better than the one that is not? Absolutely not, because it searches users. And you gave the example of code. Yeah, there's tons of like, grab these code snippets, put them on there and like, sure, it's like 50% of your page might be duplicated from elsewhere on the web, but you're just providing the proper explanations of what these code snippets mean and providing a high, that extra 50% is incredibly valuable. So I do get sort of where they were going. And I was like tongue-in-cheeking, like, yes, there is like a threshold. There has to be, but it would be very case specific because to your point, they only want one to rank. Like they don't want to cluster the entire top 10 with the exact same article. They just want one. So it's I think they've got a real balancing act there of like, you can't cross thresholds, but you can, and it's different for this kind than this kind, and trying to figure out where the thresholds are and how they get crossed.
Indeed. And how to say this? I think with in SEO, trying to understand the context of the way words are used is greatly important. The example here, I guess the example from the duplicate content story is the word content. What does that mean exactly? What does Google mean by that? In what context are they using this? And again, the reason this is important is people are making up ideas that become hard rules that everyone else follows in the industry because somebody posts it in a forum or publishes an article, and they got the context of the word itself all wrong. Like that's misunderstandings happen that way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did I say last stupid question? I was close. This one will take just a second though. And it's a good explanation for a whole bunch of stuff that Google doesn't actually do. If you keyword stuff your URLs, just going out of your way to change those URLs for strong ranking purposes, Google's not going to actually punish you for it. You get penalized for it. There's no penalization whatsoever for going and changing your URLs and keyword stuffing them. Your site's going to fall like a lead balloon, but it's not that it's being penalized. It's that you threw a wrench into the machine and the machine stopped working. So it's like, that meme where someone's riding along on the bicycle and they like put the stick right in between their like front spokes, and suddenly they fall over and break their knee, and they blame some third party.
Mm-hmm.
Often this is what happens with webmasters. They do something really dumb, some knucklehead move, and then they throw a spanner into the machine. The machine grinds to a halt in relation to their website, and their website suddenly falls, to the shop room floor at the bottom of the sorting room, and doesn't come up for searches anymore. It's not that you're being penalized; it's that you're a knucklehead. That's what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, something else that I can take from this is if we combine the two stories together, right? Like changing URLs and stuffing keywords in there.
Sure.
When Google says, basically, we're not going to punish you for like cramming your keywords in there. To me, that actually does reinforce what John was saying and what we were talking about earlier, where since they're okay with keyword stuffing, it's clearly such a negligible signal that they're not even worried about it. So now I can say, don't bother changing your URLs because it's such a small factor. Again, if you ask me at the beginning, I would advise on specific structures and like slug structures, hierarchy structures, but it's such a small thing that Google's willing to go, yeah, cram your keywords. We don't care, right? Like that's how minor a factor that aspect of your website actually must be.
Now, just as they don't penalize you for it, they also probably not going to reward you for it either. They already know what your website's about. They've been all over it for how long? If you've got a structure that seriously inhibits Google from getting from point A to B to C to Z to out of the other end of the website, even then, you don't necessarily got to change your URL structure or your web structure. You just got to provide like a clear link path from A to B and sometimes you can even accomplish that with something as simple as an HTML sitemap. I know it's dumb in like 1999 sort of technology, but it actually works.
Right.
So,
yep.
Okay, we're going to be running shy of time before we know it. So Google just had its own sort of the mini conference called Search On. And some major change, well, actually no major changes happened unless you think the composition of search results in the mobile environment are major. I'm doing a neat study, actually. Just started this morning, looking at bounce rates in relation to mobile search and desktop search, and then transactions and conversions and stuff. But it all started with a question on bounce rates, and the research I'm doing has led me back to looking at how the search results themselves are constituted for different types of visitor to this website that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating when you think of how people on different types of mobile device will get slightly different types of search results, and that completely dictates the way they click. You know, the way they're the choices that they're going to make, and it could be just as subtle as the viewport on one device being a little bit larger than the viewport on another. So the cascade of information that as it unfolds as the SERP page unravels could be just slightly different, eh? No,
yeah, it is a really fascinating area, like a really fascinating area of all this.
I'm in the rabbit hole, and I only meant to devote an hour to it. So anyway, Google is experimenting again with how mobile search results are going to be presented by sort of removing the walls or the little separators between text, video, and images. They're all just going to be part of one big SERP set, sort of like you see on the old-fashioned version of Reddit. If you can imagine what that used to look like, or the new mobile app version. That's what Google SERP results Google's experimenting with in mobile search results now. It'll be weird, because I think it might introduce even more of a surfing style. But again, people go to search to get answers, not to spend like a half hour trolling through Reddit.
No, that's very true. Like, if I want to spend half an hour trolling Reddit, I'll go to Reddit.
Go to Reddit.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. Now I think Google is trying to change that, right? Like, but we go to Google when I have a question, I need an answer, like, or I have an intent to acquire something, information, product, whatever that might be. And so I go to Google for that. Whereas you would go to, say, Facebook or Reddit when you're like, or TikTok, right? Like, entertain me, right? Like, show me something a little more or less directed.
And this is a problem Google's having right now when it comes to younger users who have grown up in information environments rather than academic environments, or I shouldn't say it like that, but the way to access information for many of the younger users is very different than the way to access users for many of the older users, including the ones who established the interface at Google, come from. So I read an article the other day that more younger users, say 18 to 25, are pursuing news information and information search through TikTok than through Google. But about 20% of that information is completely bunk, completely, absolutely, just demonstrably wrong, because there's very few gatekeepers on that. So, but it's not whether the information's right or wrong, it's whether the information is readily accessible. That's important to the user.
Right. But of course, when you get your news, and like, I'll note, I'm the same, right? Like, I bias my own news. If I'm getting my news from a social network, it is incredibly biased. My own as well. Like, that's like, just to go. And now listeners will learn shockingly a little bit about my friends. I was one of the people absolutely gobsmacked when Trump won, right? I was absolutely shocked.
And it was because I think Trump was too.
News was like, absolutely, I was gaining my news and understanding the world around me based on feeds that were on social. And those feeds were biased, right? Like, so that is, I think, the big danger of that, of course, is being Dave, right? And going, I'm not getting any sort of less bias. I mean, all sources are biased. We all know that. But like,
I think we're getting more, not at bias exactly, but at straight out absolute disinformation.
Yes, disinformation is a different thing altogether.
The people who are trying to explain how the World Economic Forum is trying to impose one world government that will require all of us to be microchipped by Bill Gates, that kind of misinformation. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about that the users are finding on TikTok and on YouTube, by the way. Experiments by I think Edelman Group showed that a new user going to YouTube will within 10, 15 video clicks be looking at some really hardcore, radical, and heavily misogynist right-wing content. It's just what the algorithm's going to feed to them. Yeah. And I don't know if that's getting news from a biased source, because that would suggest the search engine itself is biased. I think culture just introduces these biases, and machine learning doesn't know what to do with them. So it accentuates the pattern.
Well, indeed, but and then at the same time, like, and why I would suggest that social networks are worse than search networks for this. A decent, like, many people might disagree, and that's totally fine. But I'm also then biasing myself, not just with the friends that I have, but of course, all of these the social networks are catered to clicks, like for the most part. Like, we see Dave engages with this. So I'm actually reinforcing constantly, not just in who is in my network, but also what I engage with. I'm constantly reinforcing what my opinion is. And eventually, like, you can go in and see your Facebook settings, and they've gotten me wrong and right in different things. Like, they'll have me right in my political leanings, but wrong country, right? Or whatever. But, this is where it takes, I think, a one step further than if you were gathering the same, yes, it'll be biased information, but from a search network as opposed to a social network, which is, at least I'm not adding me into the mix. Like, and I'm not adding my network into the mix. At least it's like, in the world, here's the bias that we're seeing, and we're presenting that to you, as opposed to, in your tiny slice of the world, this is what. Like, the world is, this is what is popular, and this is what's coming up here, right? Among your friends that you agree with and engage in constantly, here's what they're saying about this topic, right? I mean, we're just sort of circling back to, like,
by the way,
TikTok's the same, people getting their news from, like, TikTok and the problems that I see that creating on top of just fake information.
And this is what the people at Google have to deal with when they're thinking about making any sort of interface change, when thinking about search results, or how the search results will interact with the users. There's a few other things that they're going to be introducing to mobile search. They're going to be introducing shortcuts. They're going to introduce results in the search bar. As you're typing, result sets will start coming up underneath the bar that you're typing your query into. Enhanced query refinement, so it'll be suggesting how to refine your query to come up with even better combinations of words. Web stories will come into mobile search. And again, the combination, just jamming text, images, and video into one long stream of results, rather than 10 links and a video section and images and news and all that. So just putting it all together. Those are the changes that are coming to mobile, and that's going to really change people's relationships to mobile. And the other point I want to make is mobile is so many more people access so many more websites via mobile or a mobile device than desktop these days. It's almost 2/3 to 1/3, although the transactions and the power transactions tend to happen in the desktop environment in the e-com world. Research done on mobile, purchase done when you feel at home and safe on your computer, which is probably far less secure than the mobile device, but people feel better about it. So it's bigger, so I can put my credit card into it.
Yeah. Well, and generally, like, because I've actually done that before. Part of it for me as well, for people, is when I'm on mobile, I'm probably out. And I don't really necessarily want to stand there and type in my credit card with it sitting out in front of me. Whereas at my desk, I have my credit card just sitting on my desk. Like it's fine sitting there. So there is that security as well.
Okay. We are just about through with the clock. We don't even got time to jump any other story, although there's a couple of them that would have been a good deal of fun. We talked about conferences earlier. We got a couple quick seconds. Talked about conferences earlier. You gonna be out and about sometime in the next few months?
Yeah, gonna be speaking on ML and search at PubCon in Austin. So that'll be my first time in a couple of years getting together with the PubCon crew. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm not quite ready to get back on the circuit or to travel publicly yet. I'm still like COVID paranoid, but I never got sick, so I'm super paranoid. Okay, we have gone full clock. So the cool thing about radio is we can do this and be like a gajillion miles away from people the whole time. It'd still be real close. And we're going to get real close again next week. But until then, on behalf of Dave Davies from Wasted Biases, this is Jim Hedger from Digital Always Media. You have been listening to Webcology on WMR.FM, recorded live to podcast on the 29th of September, 2022. Big shout out to all the folks in Florida, all folks in Webmaster Radio, WMR.FM, Cannabis Radio, to our producer Ricky, to Brasco, Darren, and Brandy, and everybody in Florida who just went through their ordeal of a lifetime, or at least a once in a century storm. Thanks for being there, guys. Folks, stay well, rank well, be kind to each other, and we'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of WebmasterRadio.fm's management or sponsors. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without authorized consent of WebmasterRadio.fm is prohibited.
Did you know that 81% of customers will try to handle problems themselves by searching out solutions? If you're using traditional service flows, you're missing out on digital customer journeys that happen long before they get to one of your agents. Digital Superience with Nice CX1 solves that issue by proactively meeting customers on a web search level outside your website. Give customers resolutions faster, smarter, and more instinctively. That's Digital Superience. That's Nice CX1. Learn more at nice.com.